Yarn Yoshi is finally back in the form of Yoshi's Woolly World. And not only did Nintendo show it off during their E3 digital event, but we even got to play it too. In fact, between our playtime at E3 and Nintendo's Treehouse Live event, all 3 levels and the boss fights shown during the game's unveiling have been fully revealed. Which is to say, don't expect anything too mind-blowing from our analysis this time, but that doesn't mean we didn't find some interesting things to point out. Okay, so Yoshi's Woolly World is basically what you would get if you threw Kirby's Epic Yarn and Yoshi's Island into a blender, and sprinkled a little bit of Yoshi's story on top. Of course, you have the yarn-based visuals from Kirby's Epic Yarn, as well as being able to unravel parts of the environment to reveal secret passages, the lack of a time limit, emphasis on collecting beads, and supporting 2-player co-op. But that's about where the similarities to Kirby's Epic Yarn ends, because just about everything else appears to be from Yoshi's Island. From the similar looking environments to nearly identical controls, and even trademark elements like the flower-powered goal ring. It's all extremely similar, but there is one key thing missing from that series: Baby Mario. Instead, Yoshi actually has a health meter this time, a la Yoshi's story, which means he'll die if he ends up taking too much damage. Poor little guy. Now, the lack of Baby Mario might also explain why it seems he won't be switching Yoshis this time around, as the same green and red ones, for first and second player respectively, can be seen in every gameplay sequence shown off so far, unlike the Yoshi Island games where you would change Yoshis every level. So it seems that, despite whatever the game's story may end up being, that these 2 Yoshis may be going about the adventure alone. Now, you probably don't need us to tell you that yarn and other knitting-based things can be found everywhere in this game, but it's actually pretty impressive just how far the developers ran with the idea. Let's take a look at the demo's first level, Course 1 for example. Of course, the ground itself is always made of some kind of fabric, such as the wool carpeting here that gives the impression of a field full of plants. Even the main path that Yoshi sticks to is clearly some kind of ribbon, and the white buttons punctuating the landscape are meant to represent flowers. And do you see the orange flowers too? They're actually a cutout piece of fabric held together by a yellow pin. Now, if any of this looks familiar, it might be because this looks almost identical to the first level of Yoshi's Island. I mean, the ground is the same color, you've got the white flowers, and then the orange ones growing from green bushes in the foreground. And you can even see the same colored mountains as well as rock formations dotting the landscape. Hell, even the first enemy you encounter is a Shyguy. So we don't think it's a stretch to say this is probably the first level of this game too. But let's get back to the whole yarn thing for a second, because we're still not done. Such as how even the sky background is clearly some kind of fabric, complete with creases. And you can even see it rustling from a breeze. And the clouds hanging in front of it are supported by wires too. In fact, practically everything is tethered to the environment in some way, such as these platforms supported by knitting needles, or these ones held in place by pins. And if we move on to the demo's Course 2, we can see even more examples, such as bushes and trees made of stacked balls of yarn, held together by more needles. And we can see something similar in Course 3 as well, where a rainbow in the background is supported by needles. Oh, and if you look down, you can even see the peaks of more yarn ball mountains below peeking up through the clouds. Yep, they really went all out. Heck, you can even see the wool material bend under Yoshi's weight, which is a really cool touch. But wool plays a much bigger role, than just looking cool, as it plays an essential role in the gameplay as well. And much of that revolves around Yoshi's tongue, which he can use to unravel yarn enemies and turn them into eggs. Balls of yarn, of which he can hold up to 6. And these balls of yarn can then be aimed and fired, just like eggs in Yoshi's Island. Only this time, the yarn balls can do more than just taking out enemies, such as by using them to fill in yarn outlines, turning them into something you can interact with, like platforms or warp pipes. But enemies aren't the only way in which you can obtain yarn balls, as you can also find them in these yarn ball crates, or by using Yoshi's tongue to unravel wool knots in the environment, which not only reveals secret areas or opens passages, but also nets them a larger than normal yarn ball, making it even easier to hit the thing you're targeting. In addition, you can even eat your co-op partner too for an instant yarn ball at any time. Now, as you might have noticed, these yarn balls also match the color of whatever Yoshi just ate. Now, although we didn't see any use of this in the demo, we'd be very surprised if this doesn't factor into the gameplay in some way in the full game, with color-based puzzles that depend on which yarn ball you use. Especially because different colored eggs in past Yoshi games also had slightly different attributes. And beyond yarn balls, Yoshi will also occasionally be able to collect small creatures called Huff and Puffins that create temporary platforms when you throw them, such as in the demo's 3rd level. Now there's still one more use for yarn balls too, but before we get to that, let's first take a look at the enemies we know about so far. And first up is a hallmark of the Yoshi series, Shyguys. And they once again come in multiple colors too, including red, green, yellow, and blue ones. And eating any of them will result in a yarn ball of that color. And one kinda cool detail is when you actually unravel a Shyguy, his mask actually flies off. And if you look on the back side of it, it even has a little button strap. Aw, those Shyguys, they're cute even when they're being ripped apart by the seams. Next up, we have Koopatroopers and Paratroopers, and like usual, you can spit their shell out to use as a weapon. Only if you look close, the shell is actually a button this time around. Then we have Nipper Spores, which turn into Nipper Plants, and they just hop around like usual. And finally, a pair of Piranha Plants, including wild Patooey Piranhas that spit spiked plants. Now interestingly, the Piranha Plants actually appear to be asleep until you either get too close or perhaps make too much noise, so maybe you can actually sneak up on them. Now there is one thing almost all the enemies we just mentioned have in common. They're all made of yarn, with one key exception. The Piranha Plants don't seem to be. In fact, they seem to be real. I mean, as real as you can get by Mario standards. So that seems a bit weird. But they're also the only main enemy we've seen so far that Yoshi can't directly consume. Instead, he has to first tie them up by throwing a yarn ball at them, at which point he can then either jump on them or pull them down to destroy them. And in case there were any doubt that they weren't made of yarn, they just vanish when you defeat them, as opposed to other enemies where you can see the yarn unraveling as you kill them. So what's going on here? Well, this could just be a stylistic choice to easily denote which enemies can and cannot be consumed, and then turn into yarn balls. So basically, anything made of yarn is free for the eating, but ones that aren't will take some extra effort. So could this mean there'll be even more real enemies in the game? And of course, we can't help but wonder this might factor into the game's story at all. After all, in a world where just about everything is made of yarn, anything that isn't is going to stand out. Could there be a story-based reason for this? Like, did something turn the world into yarn but left some things intact? Okay, that's enough about the enemies. Let's talk about some more of the gameplay mechanics. Now, we've already mentioned that, unlike the Yoshi Island games, Yoshi can actually take damage this time around, as indicated by the heart meter that appears around him, which has 20 health points in total. But interestingly, you only start with half of that, regardless of whether you're just starting the level or coming back from dying. Now, at first, this seems kind of unusual, but it's actually pretty typical for Yoshi games. I mean, in Yoshi's Island, you only started with 10 seconds on the Baby Mario clock, which you could then increase to 30, and in Yoshi's Story, which also had a health meter, you only started with a single health point. Yikes! Now, if you want to fill up your health meter, there are two ways you can do it so far. One is by collecting hearts, such as those that appear when popping question mark clouds. Or two, activating a checkpoint, which gives both players 5 additional hearts. Now, speaking of things you can collect, there are quite a few collectibles in Woolly World beyond just hearts. And one of them is ripped right from Yoshi's Island, being the 5 smiley flowers hidden in each level. And just like before, they get added to the goal ring at the end. Now, in the Yoshi's Island games, the goal ring also doubled as a roulette wheel, and if it landed on the flower, something good would happen, like a chance to win extra lives through a minigame. Unfortunately, in the demo, nothing happened at all, but we're confident something will in the full game, whether it's activating a bonus minigame like before or something new. But we can also see that the smiley flowers are now separated by gems, so it looks like you might be getting some kind of reward either way. Oh, and if you bring anything with you past a checkpoint, like a chomp rock or balls of yarn, they'll turn into gems too. But more on them in a little bit. Now, another even more well-hidden collectible are the 3 Wonder Wools hidden in each level. But unlike the smiley flowers, all 3 Wonder Wools in each level are actually different colors. In Course 1, for example, they're blue, purple, and pink. But even the color sets vary level to level, such as in Course 2 where you'll find a yellow one, and Course 3 which has at least orange and purple. And those color sets also don't appear to be random, as they were the same each time you replay the same levels. Which also likely means you'll only be able to collect them once for each level. So it's pretty clear they'll play an important role in the game. In fact, even the game's director said so during an interview. But what exactly could they do? Our best guess is that they'll be used to fill in some large or important object, much like how Yoshi's yarn balls can fill in pipes. And obviously, those colors will play a pretty big role too. So maybe you'll have to find a certain amount of a specific color, or maybe specific color sets to unlock something. Maybe extra levels. Who knows? Alright, there's still one more collectible worth talking about. Gems, or beads as they were called in Kirby's Epic Yarn. And they can be found everywhere, and come in all kinds of colors and sizes. But here's a secret. The color doesn't actually matter. Instead, only the size dictates how much they're worth. Small ones are 1, medium ones are 5, and the large ones are worth 10. Now in Kirby's Epic Yarn, the amount he collected was added up between levels, and we're guessing the same thing will happen here too, as we can see both Yoshi's totals being added together at the end of the level when playing in co-op, suggesting some kind of outside use for those gems. Especially because they seem to have no other purpose in the game so far, as they don't net you extra lives. So what could they be for? Well, in Kirby's Epic Yarn, they could be used to either play minigames or outfit Kirby's house with new items, so maybe something similar will happen here. Alright, we're almost done here, but there's still a few final things I wanted to point out, like even more similarities to Yoshi's Island, such as warp pipes that spit out enemies, bouncy balls you can bounce off of, sunflowers that grow from question mark clouds that you can climb, and even the return to chomp rocks, only now they have buttons for eyes. And just like in the original game, they actually come in 2 different colors, being red and blue. Now, as far as we can tell, they both function the same, although the blue ones were always hidden away behind a wool gate in the demo. If it's anything like the original game, the color could indicate that one of them will respawn if you go off screen, but we weren't able to check in the demo. Now, as for Yoshi himself, well, he handles just like he did in Yoshi's Island, including running, flutter jumping, and ground pounding. But this time, his woolly appearance allows him to take on different forms for each of those maneuvers. For instance, while running, his legs turn into wheels, whereas if he flutter jumps, he turns into helicopter blades. And finally, he transforms into a mallet when ground pounding. But while these transformations are neat, they aren't transformations in the typical Yoshi's Island sense, which allow them to turn into all kinds of vehicles. But so far, there's no sign of them in the game at all, so it's possible they won't be returning. Although not only would this be at odds with Yoshi's Island, but it would also be at odds with Kirby's Epic Yarn, which also featured transformations. But again, this game is really its own thing, so that's entirely possible. Finally, there's still one more level we haven't talked about yet, and that's a boss battle that takes place in a lava-filled cavern. Or should we say, yarn-filled cavern, as even the lava, of course, is simply colored yarn that slowly moves by. Now the boss fight itself seems to be fairly typical for the most part, in that you'll dodge his attacks, then counterattack, which in this case you do by throwing his fireballs back at him to tie him up and stun him, which causes the boss's tongue to be exposed, which he can then attack. Repeat that 3 times and he's done for. Now interestingly, at one point the boss does hop into the background to attack from there, which demonstrates that some 3D-like gameplay will appear at points in the game, again just like in Yoshi's Island. But perhaps most interesting is the fact that both Yoshis clearly enter the battle via a door, instead of being woven together as in the other levels. So we think this means that the bosses will actually come at the end of a larger level, rather than standing alone as their own independent levels. And this again, of course, is consistent with the other Yoshi's Island games. So really not a big surprise, but it's good to know regardless. Alright, and that wraps up for everything we could string together on Yoshi's Woolly World. Like usual, let us know if we missed anything by posting in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stay tuned to GameXplain.com for more on Yoshi's Woolly World and other things gaming too.